Hi friends, Reverend Cole here with another episode of Questions for Cole. It is October 7th today, 2020. No questions from the congregation this week, so that gives me a chance to look at a question that was posed in an article I was reading a few weeks ago. It's a question that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and the question is, are we, in some ways, allowing the environment and the climate crisis to take a back seat lately, because of all the other big news that seems to be taking up all of our time and energy? And I worry that the answer to that question is yes. But this article that I found this week helped to remind me that we can't afford to let that happen. It was written by Reverend Dr. Ross Bartlett, who is the United Church Formation Director at the Atlantic School of Theology in Halifax, Nova Scotia. It's one of the places where United Church ministers are trained. So let me read a little bit from this article from Ross Bartlett. It's entitled A Changing Climate. He says, as I write these words, the first great global wave of climate crises strikes has just occurred, and Canada is in the midst of a federal election. This was written back in October of 2019, a year ago. And he says, where some of the parties during this election seem to be coming to the concern about climate challenges a little late and somewhat reluctantly. Different magazines and newspapers are making loud noises about adopting the language of climate crisis as their way of underlining the seriousness of the issues. And predictably, some readers are pushing back that this is too partisan. A young Swedish girl, Greta Thunberg, has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for her work in raising consciousness about the changed reality. This is an issue that is evolving quickly. Who knows what will have happened by the time you read this in print? Well, let me tell you, quite a few things have happened in the world since October 2019. In some ways, he continues, the preacher's response and the church's response to the climate crisis is very similar to the ways in which we handle any question that sparks meaningful public debate and potentially divides opinion. We are proclaimers of the whole Bible, and we come to Scripture with a certain set of lenses. In recent days, a major figure in American Christianity stated on CNN that, quote, Greta should remember that there's a rainbow, end of quote. Apparently they thought that the rainbow was an antidote to worry about catastrophic consequences. I mean, I love rainbows, but I'm not sure that we should rely on them to save us from the current climate crisis. Bartlett goes on to say, so we ask, why would climate issues be taken up in our preaching, in our churches? Well, it's obviously a significant concern for many, including those listening on Sunday. Further, the evident changes in climate are having catastrophic effects on many parts of the human family, for which we care. Then, too, there is mounting evidence that the existential nature of the crisis is having a huge impact on many children and youth. Finally, he says, in my abbreviated list, there are strong currents of a biblical mandate to share in the care of creation. Yes, indeed. His next paragraph I won't get into in depth. All he is really talking about in the next paragraph is that we do need to have some caution when talking about this because of the obvious divisive nature, and that there are different people on different sides of issues, and that we aren't called to take any one political party's stance, but to talk about the generalities of what we can each do in terms of the climate crisis. Interesting. Then he continues, given the scope and immensity of the crisis, this is certainly a time when we need to give our listeners some concrete things they might do. The words of 19th century English cleric Sidney Smith seem relevant. Quote, it is the worst of all possible decisions to do nothing, because you can only do a little. Do what you can. End quote. What is necessary and what is possible will vary from community to community and indeed household to household, says Bartlett. Given the outsized carbon footprint of many Canadians, it seems obvious that genuine change and probably inconvenience and sacrifice may be necessary. It's important to focus on what we can do rather than what they should do. Faced with paralyzingly large issues, the ability to respond in some clear way is often liberating. And he ends with this paragraph. It is crucially important to remember the declaration of our hope. Hope and trust are not substitutes for action, but rather the motivating power in the face of crushing despair. The conviction we hold and proclaim is that the God who is always with us will not abandon us in the face of this crisis, regardless of what occurs, and even though that divine presence may not bring about the results for which we yearn. That's all from Ross Bartlett from the Atlantic School of Theology. Bartlett is certainly not alone in thinking that the church must have something to say about this issue. I think we have a responsibility to be leaders and role models here. And I hope that together we can continue working to find ways to keep climate and environmental issues at the forefront, even as other crises vie for our attention, both locally and globally. I particularly liked what he said about how our small actions are important even in the face of such a big problem. That means that it matters when we make decisions about plastic water bottles and reusable bags, and these days choosing between reusable or disposable masks. Our decisions about what we drive, how much we drive, what we buy, how much we buy, what we eat, how it's all packaged, whether we garden, how we dispose of garbage and recycling, whether we try to reuse or repurpose items, all those hundreds and hundreds of little decisions that we make every day, consciously or even subconsciously. Bartlett is reminding us that every one of those matters. And I would add that again, those decisions aren't just about us and what we do, but they are also about being role models for others in our lives and in our world. Others who see us and may be affected by our actions or our lack of action, by our care or our lack of care. I was reading a book last week, not a new book. This was written, I think it was around 30 years ago or so. And in that book, I found a very long list of actions that one person suggested we could all take to help reduce our carbon footprint. And it was so interesting to read that 30-year-old list and to see how far we've come, or in so many cases, how far we have not come in accomplishing much of anything in this struggle. We'll see if I receive any new questions this week, but I might share some of the things on that long list next week from 30 years ago if you're interested, or even if you're not. Well, that's all for today. You can send questions to me anytime about pretty much anything, religion, the Bible, theology, current events, pet peeves, whatever is on your mind. They can be really deep questions or just for fun. We've had everything you can imagine across the whole spectrum so far in the first 23 episodes, and I look forward to seeing what comes next from all of you. The email address is cole@selkirkunitedchurch.ca. Keep those questions coming in. Have a blessed Thanksgiving, and I hope to see you all soon.